Next In.
Welcome to Next In. Well, I am super thrilled to be joined by Patra Sinner. She's General Counsel of Symphonic Distribution. I'm really excited. I'm in our podcast room. You guys have seen it a couple of times. And so I'm excited to have Patra join us. Again, she works with Symphonic Distribution, a global music distribution company, with, as we've been talking earlier, offices everywhere from Colombia to Africa to Canada, New York, LA, Tampa is their headquarters. So thank you so much for joining us, Patra. But instead of me giving the big introduction, why don't you tell everyone who's watching a little bit about yourself and your journey to get there?
Oh, wow. That's a big question to unpack. First, I want to say that your podcast room is really cool. I like the layout. And
I had no part in design, I promise.
It looks great. So, wow, a little bit about me. I've done a lot of different things, and I don't say that to be cocky. I say that because when I look back on where I've been versus where I am now, I feel like there were a lot of checkpoints along the way. I started out just like as a real consumer of music, lover of music, all things, entertainment related. I used to manage and book bands. I worked for a pretty big regional booking agency before I went to law school. I'd just done everything that I could possibly do related to music, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And I thought, where I'm from here, and I grew up in South Carolina, it's just really hard, I think, to break into that business and be taken seriously, because it's certainly not a hub. I mean, we had Hootie and the Blowfish, but
hey, I didn't know that. So Hootie came from South Carolina.
They're Gamecocks, yeah. So, and we'll talk about Gamecocks, but I just felt like I needed something to like get me to stand out a little bit more. And I thought, all the panels that I'm going to, all the music conferences, I did a lot of volunteering at different places like that, just so I could meet people. It seemed like the lawyers had a hand in everything that was happening. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go to law school. Like, let's just make this happen. And so I went to law school. And as it happens when you're in law school, you're not just focused on your area of the law. I mean, I wasn't just taking entertainment law classes. I'm taking everything that you're required to take. And so I started to explore lots of different things, and I immediately started working with a solo practitioner my first year of law school, which you're really discouraged from doing. But I'd already had a career outside of law school, and I wasn't somebody who was just going to be content to sit and read cases and learn how to interpret case law. Like, I wanted to functionally learn how to be a lawyer, and the best way to do that, I think, is to just dive in and do it. And so he had an entertainment/criminal law practice, and it really just started to give me my confidence. And, I got to just explore a lot of different things there. And out of law school, I came to Charlotte, moved up to Charlotte. I went to law school in South Carolina and started doing high profile kind of domestic litigation cases, which is a pretty big departure from where I started and wanting to do entertainment law. But, sometimes our journey doesn't always go the way we think it's going to go. And that experience was just invaluable. I got to work on some great cases with some fantastic lawyers, great mentors along the way, and eventually just decided I missed my path. Like, I took a detour and I'm ready to get back on the path. And I started an artist management and label services company with a friend of mine who'd been in the business for a long time, in addition to being in private practice. So I was kind of doing both at the same time. And that's, how I ended up being led back to the music business, and just gave up my private practice and decided to go for it with Symphonic. And it's been fantastic. I love it.
So tell everyone a little bit about Symphonic Distribution, not necessarily about you, but what Symphonic Distribution does for the marketplace. Like, where is their fit?
So we are a global music distributor. We distribute for artists, labels, anyone that has ownership or rights, authorizations to distribute music to over 200 plus music platforms. So we help monetize and exploit that content. We get in turn for that a distribution fee or a subscription fee, depending on where the artist falls in that tier. So we have a couple different entry points depending on where you are in your career. So that I think is the cool thing about working for a music distributor like us, is that with these entry points, whether it's an emerging artist all the way up to somebody who is very established already, who has a career behind them, there has to be a way to get the music from, say, your Dropbox or your hard drive, like wherever you're storing it, to platforms where you can monetize that. There has to be like a middle place there to get from one point to the other. And if you don't have a label deal, how are you doing that? You have to use a company like Symphonic. And to me, it's really the way of the music business. And just it allows artists to be the CEOs of their own music empires, which I love, that you can do this without a label now, that you can create your own story, build your own team. It's amazing to me. I love it.
So who are some good stories, feel good stories of people or bands, groups that have made it now without a label? Because again, I don't know the music industry like you do, but my understanding is that really in many ways that was how you made it in the past, was you got your record label deal and then you have kind of like, now that's what drives behind you, right? Yeah. But because of places like Symphonic Distribution, that's not as necessary as it used to be, right? So who are some of these people who are able to be their own CEO of their music?
There are just so many success stories within the walls of Symphonic and what we do. And some of these, I mean, I could probably throw out names and you're like, I've never heard of that artist. But it's just, there's so many different genres of music, the volume of content out there and different pockets of audiences. And, I will speak to somebody who, to my knowledge, we didn't distribute this artist, but Co Wetzel out of Texas, I think is a great success story of someone who made this happen without a label for the longest time, was able to just, and I've heard, I didn't fact check this, I don't know anybody on his team, but heard he recorded his early recordings, in a bathroom somewhere. And it wasn't like a high tech or high cost production. It wasn't something that was polished, but he created a story. He knew his audience was, he played to that audience. He just created this whole persona around it. And, it's my understanding at some point he had major label artists like buying onto his shows and things because he built such a following. And I do think at some point he ended up going with a label, maybe just to consolidate everything under one roof. And hopefully I'm not mischaracterizing anything that happened in that camp. But I do, stories like that always, catch my attention because I'm like, he went for it. There probably wasn't a huge investment on the front end, but definitely I would guess a lot of sweat equity in building up that story and creating the fan base, which is really what it's about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good to know. I'll let my 9-year-old daughter know that she's got a chance. Recording in the bathroom is definitely, it does equal success. Mm-hmm. So being that you're on the legal side with them, I'm sure, I would guess, something that you keep hearing about is AI and where that's going. And I'm really intrigued for a lot of reasons. This is like, again, very recent. We're talking the last week or two. I've had multiple conversations. In fact, I'm going to be watching a presentation at Northwestern University with a general counsel from G2, who's going to talk about AI in the legal space, not so much just music, but legal in general. Right. And then here in Nashville, we have startup companies that are working on different products that are helping to protect artists against AI coming in or actually protect them, but also be able to utilize AI in the music space and give that to the artist and have the artist be able to control that rather than, I can go and make a deep fake of me singing Taylor Swift or whatever it is, right? And now make a bunch of money off of her music and songs and so on. So where do you see AI, legal, and music kind of all coming together and battling? Because there's 1,000 challenges with what's about to happen.
Right.
I say it from the Black Mirror space, hashtag Black Mirror. I love that show. That first episode where, in a lot of ways, the artist, if you will, was kind of taken over by AI. So they lost their control because of AI and contracts that they signed and so on. So how do you see this playing out, or what do you see some of the major hurdles that we're going to face with that?
And as you can imagine, this is coming up. I've done a few speaking engagements over the last few weeks, and no matter what the topic was intended to be, this is where the topic goes.
Yep.
It's the hot subject right now. And I think our approach, we're a music distributor, but we're also content creators ourselves, like inside Symphonic as well. And so we see it from really both sides of the equation. And I think it's just like any other thing. We're talking about AI today. We'll probably be talking about, some other hot topic next year. Last year, it was like Web3 and NFTs. And there's always an evolution of things that we have to catch up to. But what we can't do is like bury our heads and pretend like it's not happening, because it's going to happen. And it's like one of those things where the more you tell people they can't do something, or that they should avoid something or stay away from it, it's like complete attraction. Like, I have to do it. And so then I think it's just about, for businesses, figuring out what are your risks related to that, and shoring up your legal contracts and things to prepare for that risk. But then on the opportunity side, it's like, how can this work for me? How can I stop completely working against it and work with it and educate our clients about it? And how can it work for them? Like, let's look for the good parts and the bad parts and prepare for both of those, and probably meet ourselves in the middle. But from the legal world, the Copyright Office just closed receiving comments, I think, on the 30th. I think they were taking comments from lots of different contributors, whether that was research professors, whoever wanted to, have a voice in what they're going to consider before they give out their next guidance on it. And so it just hasn't fully fleshed itself out in the legal world, but I don't think that that's out of the norm. I think that is how this all works. We have these conversations like this in the court of public opinion, like we soften out the boundaries and the edges and figure out, okay, what can we live with? What gets us really heated? And then those conversations, I think, play out in courtrooms, and those judges then say, okay, I'm working within the bounds of what I have, which wasn't, didn't consider this because this wasn't on the table when the law was created. So, hey, legislators and other people who create laws, we need you to deal with this issue and then give us some further guidance. And it just keeps making its way up the chain until we've set the guardrails and have real laws in place. And by that time, we're well on to the next topic.
Yep. So, and you and I could make a lot of money if we could forecast what next year's Web3 AI, what's next year's topic going to look like. But, and again, I think of it from the artist perspective of someone who does make all this music, write the songs, has the voice that they've either individually or through training learned how to sound beautiful, and then that can be stripped from them through AI. So that's the danger that the artist faces. But like you said, there's a lot of opportunity for that too. It's exciting for my daughter to be able to create pick a name out of the hat, Taylor Swift, Liz Grimes, or whatever it is, song that she's into. Mm-hmm. That's an exciting way for an artist to connect with a fan that didn't exist 10 years ago. Maybe you could have the melody in the background and sing to it. But now there are ways to almost mimic voice, to create a song and then have that person sing, with you. And that's all through AI. The danger, though, is making sure that the people who created it, the artists themselves, are able to get value out of their time and effort, right? And their talents. Mm-hmm. And that's where you get to be a part of, I'm sure, making sure that the artists and your clients are protected so that they can use it as an opportunity rather than have themselves get taken advantage of, right?
Yes, for sure. I think, looking at those things in contracts and, it's another revenue stream that wasn't thought about in older contracts. And now as you're negotiating those things or renegotiating those things, you want to think about that as another potential revenue stream. And certainly for companies who are on the front end of developing and participating in all of this, to think about attribution models. And I think there are a few companies, I believe there was a press release recently by Psalms AI who, Symphonic has been in discussions with because they've developed an attribution model. So I do think there are people out there thinking about ways to do this ethically and responsibly and finding ways that it can be used in that positive way, but also those original artists can be credited for the work, monetize it, and then it just becomes another monetization stream for them. But making sure all those things work together so that it is fair.
Yeah, 100%. And so you said you're from South Carolina and you're a Gamecocks fan, right?
Yes.
What part of South Carolina did you grow up in?
Sumter, which is where Shaw Air Force Base is located. It's about 45 minutes below Columbia.
And so how has that shaped where you've ended up, right? So you started there and in your mind, you're like, look, I loved music, but that's not the place where I can really be successful in music, or at least that's how you felt. How has that shaped your career as you've gone on?
I think all the checkpoints that I've had along the way have given me just the ability to interact with so many different types of people. I think starting there, just growing up in a very small town and, I look at all people the same. Like, I just want to get to know them. And a lot of this, I think a lot of the music business is like relationship building. And so I was always putting myself out there at conferences. I wanted to hear what people, who lived in New York or who lived in LA and, or lived, internationally, like what was their life like? How was it different from mine? And like soaking all of that up and then starting to travel, like as I grew up. And I think it just opens your eyes and broadens your horizons to be able to interact with so many different types of people. And really that's what the music industry is just lots of different types of creatives coming together with collaborations. And, if that's the type of thing that you thrive on, then this is the space for you. And so I think maybe you could look at where I grew up as being a little bit sheltered and kind of out of the norm for the business. But in my opinion, it prepared me to be receptive to all of that because I wanted to experience what I didn't have growing up.
So we'll shift a little bit again. We run this podcast, but we're a recruiting agency. So at the end of the day, that's where our minds tend to go is how have you faced in your company, Symphonic Distribution, faced any challenges in the hiring world today versus where it was maybe 5 years ago or 3 years ago? Are you seeing it as easier, harder? How have you navigated as you're looking at bringing on talent, not so much the clients, but bringing on talent internally to grow that has changed in the recent times?
So when I was in private practice, I did participate in our recruiting process. We did a lot of on-campus interviews with law students, and that has now shifted into growing my own team at Symphonic. So I've sat through a lot of interviews, had the opportunity to talk with a lot of different people, reviewed a lot of resumes. And I don't know that, things haven't just changed dramatically in what I've seen. For me, I think what I'm looking for is someone when I'm trying to hire someone is something about the resume that stands out to me as being a little bit unique or different. And I think, for being in the music space, that makes sense. That might not make sense depending on what type of role you're looking to hire for. But certainly just like accuracy, conciseness, me coming from the litigation world, I usually was operating in a space of I have, X amount of time to get this person's story out and win at all costs. So that's what I'm looking for on the resume is get it on one page, attract the attention right away and win this. Like you want to win this position if you're super interested in it. And then when I get into like the interviewing process, I really am not looking at the resume. Honestly, once the person has gotten there, I don't want to focus on what's on the resume. I want to focus on the conversation like we're having right now. It's like, is there a human to human connection here? Like, can I foresee myself, especially on a lean team like we have at Symphonic, engaging with this person every day? Will we communicate well with each other? do we kind of understand the goals of this and where we're going, what we're trying to accomplish? And to me, that's the starting point. Then we can get back into the details of experience and qualifications for the job, but we got to pass the vibe check first.
Yeah, I think it's not talked about enough, even in our industry, even, internally, we talk a lot about making sure that the person was just halfway enjoyable to talk to. If you didn't like the person, when we go out recruiting, let's say you say, hey, come bring me an associate or whatever. If we don't even enjoy talking to them and they're rude and dismissive and so on, I don't care that technically they hit the bar, because I'm telling you, that person's not going to fit. They're going to have to sit down with Patra or whoever it is. And if there isn't a good vibe and we can't talk even Gamecocks football for 3 minutes, this is going to be a problem, because we work together as humans. We don't just tackle litigation. We still have to work together. And so I do think it is really important, the soft skills portion of things. I actually did a talk. I was speaking at a conference to high school groups, teachers and principals, and they were asking how to prepare their kids better for the workforce. And I think a lot of times they think about the technical preparation, and it's like they've got to learn how to just communicate, have fun with people, and make sure that they are socially apt, that they can work well with other people around them in teams. They're not demanding, rude, etc. So yes. I would agree. I think soft skills are terribly important.
I would take someone with a lower GPA any day over someone with a high GPA who couldn't communicate with me. And when I reflect on that, from being in law school, I wonder, not to call anybody out or be negative in any way, but I just wonder for the top tier of the class, like, did they end up landing their dream jobs? Are they where they wanted to be, versus somebody who may have been middle tier, but just was a hustler and knew how to communicate with people and, was just driven in a different way. So I think
100%. I totally agree. And I didn't go to law school, but I'm curious, in law school, do they emphasize at all that concept of, hey, we want to make sure you get good grades, we want to make sure you do well on your LSATs, etc. However, let's take a course on general human to human communication and interview skills and ability to work as a team and so on. Do they press that a lot, or is that something that you're like, well, really, there's such an emphasis on making sure 4.0, top of your class, all of that it almost gets lost?
I think generally law schools are concerned with making sure that their students can pass the bar, which gets them the license. There are, I think, on a more micro level, professors who know that those things are important. I think taking a clinic where you get some hands-on experience. I did a criminal practice clinic. Professor Gaines, shout out to him. I think he just retired.
There you go.
But I loved that class because it was practical and it was more like the hands-on experience I was getting with the solo practitioner who also was an adjunct teaching the entertainment law class there, and who really helped me with those skills of just like, okay, great. I know you wrote a brief, but just tell me, like, practically tell me what I need to know here. I don't want to read this brief is too long. Like, let's
talk to me like I'm an 8-year-old and explain it to me so that I can understand it and not have to read, your 22-page brief. Just tell me your feelings.
Yeah. And so my first mentor out of law school at, this great firm that I worked at, and he was, he'd done cases on court TV, just an excellent litigator. But I know some of the first things I'd turned in when I was using legalese, he would just like go in and redline all of it and say, this is going to be presented with my name and my bar number on it. And I don't speak to people this way, not in a letter, not when I'm communicating with them verbally, not when I'm, handing an motion to the court. I'm not speaking like a lawyer. I'm speaking like I want people to understand me. And that was effective for him. And so it felt like giving me the freedom to be myself, be practical, and to learn from somebody who'd made that work.
Awesome. So South Carolina law is a fantastic place to study. And I'm assuming, like we talked about earlier, Clemson law produces horrendous lawyers, correct?
There is no Clemson law.
Oh, is there no Clemson law? Oh, well, I was trying to knock Clemson because I know you're a big South Carolina fan. We have a guy in the office who played sports at Clemson. He's a huge Clemson fan. He says he hates Scar, and I'm like, that's just because they're the better university in the state, right? So, all right. So I guess we'll just have to talk about how Clemson football sucks this year. So
I mean, we can, or we could just say how much I love Spencer Rattler.
there you go. There you go. You're like, why do we have to dog out the other school? Can't we just say South Carolina's great?
And I will say, because I am from South Carolina, that anytime South Carolina is not in the running and it's not a rivalry between us, I will support Clemson. I think Greenville is like such a hot area of South Carolina right now. I love the way that it's grown, and I will gladly support Clemson in anything that they do when it's not against us. So
I would agree. My in-laws live there, so it is a wonderful part of the country, and South Carolina is a better school. So, all right. So now on to a couple of personal questions. You're in the music space. Normally, I ask about food or something, but I got to ask, who is your, like, if right now, if I grabbed your phone and I pulled up your Spotify, who would you be listening to currently?
Oh my gosh. I will look at my Spotify. I mean, my music.
Oh, is that bad? I guess, is that bad to say Spotify? Maybe you're like, ooh, I don't like them. I'm Apple Music. I don't know. I have Spotify.
We have relationships with all of them. I will say Spotify and Apple are the ones I use the most, and how I share music with other people. As you can see, I have a picture of, let me move the right way. I have a picture of Elvis behind me. Jamie had said you might ask me for my favorite movie, so I was prepared to talk about Elvis because I'm such an Elvis fan, and I love the movie. Austin Butler portrayed him, and I feel like I would say, we talked earlier about stories in the music business, that the stories of Elvis kind of transcend time, because he was one of those with the super fans, and there's such a good side of that story and a bad side of that story, which I think is reflective of the music business still to this day, is that he knew as an artist he needed to reshape and recreate himself. I think he'd be proud of that movie because of the collaborations that were there to modernize what he'd already done and layer on with like Doja Cat, Eminem, like bringing it current. And I think he'd be really excited about that as sort of the king, pun definitely intended, of like recreating himself generationally. But also the other side of that is like what built him up, the team around him, was also part of what I think was his demise. And like not being fully aware of the label agreement, not being fully aware of the artist management agreement. And those things still happen to this day. I mean, we're hearing about it in the industry from all these amazing artists who just don't understand what they're signing on for, don't understand that an advance is really a loan, like, and how you fall into these traps. And so he transcends time. I think he's just a great artist. And
all right, that was gonna be my next question, is who is the artist? But I got to spin off from that because I've talked to so I have two 9-year-old daughters, and they've watched this Taylor Swift don't know, documentary or whatever it is, and it's just mind blowing to see her and how larger than life, right? This isn't just popular. There's like this next tier. The people that come to mind: Elvis, obviously, the Beatles.
Yeah.
Currently, it's Taylor Swift, and I was trying to think who else might enter that same category of during their time, their reign at the top. They weren't just a big band or a big artist; they were so much further ahead of everyone in terms of popularity that it like was mind blowing. Because like Guns N' Roses, amazing. Yeah. And I still would say the greatest album of all time is Appetite for Destruction. That's me.
I love that band. Yeah, I just saw that. I took my daughter to see them for her first time months ago. Yeah. It was great.
So who else falls in that category of the Elvis, the Beatles, and we'll call it Taylor Swift is today?
Well, I will also say about Taylor Swift today is that if you look at Spotify streaming numbers, Bad Bunny actually has been ahead of her lately, and I think maybe the last 2 years he was more streamed than her on Spotify. Hopefully, I'm not getting that stat wrong. But what I've loved to see lately is so many other genres, like him really bringing forth the Latin genre and making it pop and mainstream, and to new and different audiences. And so that space broadening to other types of music. And I think that is really cool that the space is just opening up, and it's not just for one type of music, it's for lots of different types of music. And I'm really excited to see him doing so well. In fact, I think Symphonic had distributed his music long before my time, but I think he was
Really?
at some point. Yeah.
There you go. So there's the powerful story.
Yeah, that is a great story.
So now you have to answer. Who is on your Spotify? Who are you listening to right now?
I'm a big Halsey fan. I do listen to her a lot. And sometimes I'll get on these kicks. I've had a lot of 70s rock. Traffic I've been playing. And I only know like one or two of their songs, but I've had them on lately. And The Doors.
What a good movie too. The
Yes.
Doors movie by Oliver Stone. Like, oh my gosh. That's got to be a top 50 movie.
Yes. Yeah. It was Val Kilmer.
Yes. And he was awesome. That is a fantastic movie that everyone needs to watch.
Yes.
As long as you're not, like under 16, there's definitely some stuff going on.
Almost Famous is another one of those movies that I really love. And I know it was kind of loosely based on, it's fiction, but I'm sure it could have matched quite a few bands at that time.
Yeah. Zeppelin era or whatever, late 60s, 70s. Yeah, that is Kate Hudson. That was a fantastic movie.
Speaking of Zeppelin, and we touched on AI earlier and how we use AI training to make artists sound like others. Like, how many Zeppelin-like bands do you think have come along? Not AI related, but I mean, let's think about Greta Van Fleet. Not to just zero in on someone, but it's such a sound alike. And even a look-alike to some extent. And I love that band and I support them and I've gone to see them, but that's not totally off base from kind of what we're talking about from an AI perspective.
That's fair. I guess the only argument to it is they have the talent to recreate what is out there. And as long as they don't necessarily steal their music, and if they did, they give license royalties back. So I guess that's part of it. Is with AI, it's a different form of talent. I guess it's a computing talent to match it versus a vocal talent or training. It's an interesting discussion. Hashtag Led Zeppelin. They're the best band ever. Personally, I would vote for them number one. But
yeah, I just think it raises some interesting questions because we all have our ultimate bands that we love, and we can, anything can kind of become fan fiction, I think, because you have that influence and you loved it so much that it's going to find its way into what you do.
Yeah. And I think just in a lot of ways, again, I think what you guys are doing and a lot of other companies around here that I hear of and so on are trying to make sure, like you said, the artist can be the CEO, that they're the ones who get to be in charge. Just like what you said, Elvis Presley probably lost that ability to be in charge of what was happening. And because of it, that's the downside to the story, right?
Yeah. And thankfully we still have his music and that legacy. But yeah, I think we probably would have had him a lot longer, maybe speculating. But if he had been more aware in the early stages of what was happening there, and that holds absolutely true for artists now, and I'm on the company side of this, the distributor side of this. I'm drafting the contracts that artists and labels are signing, but we try to be very transparent. I try to draft in a way that it's easy to read. It's not we're not trying to hide the ball. We want everyone to understand the relationship between us because that saves problems on both sides. And then if you don't understand, finding people in private practice who can explain this is what this means. But most distributors like us, we're doing licensing deals where we're licensing and monetizing. We're not taking ownership. And a lot of times that can be the difference between a major label deal and a distribution deal is we're not taking ownership. This eventually comes back to you and you do what you want with it when our relationship is no longer there. So it just make sure you understand those things.
Yep. No, I think that's important. So last question, we go to South Carolina. What food do we got to try?
Oh my gosh. This is something that I picked up from my grandmother for Thanksgiving. I was on a kick for a while where I would make homemade collard greens. And I know that that's kind of a weird thing, and not everybody eats that.
It's a very Southern thing.
It is a very
That works.
Southern thing, with like grits and collard greens and just like very homemade type Southern food. But I learned how to make those myself, trial and error, try to copy her. But my grandmother was very secretive about her recipes. And I feel like she had written one down for me, and I feel like she left out some steps or some ingredients just to, like, keep that close. And so it's a little bit of trial and error, which I think is a thing with Southern food. You just kind of figure it out as you go.
Yeah. All right. So Patra, how can, for those listening who are like, hey, I want to work with Symphonic, or I want to just talk to Symphonic and what they're doing, or follow you, how can people reach out to you after listening to this and go, I'd love to be on Patra's team or a different team over at Symphonic, or maybe want to be a client? How can people reach out to you?
So you can check out our website, symphonic.com. That will tell you what you need to know about all the different services we offer. There's applications online for, depending on what type of client you want it to be. If it was a subscription client, we have this great starter program for emerging artists. If you're a bit more established, maybe the partner program is right. That's like a rev share model, but there's an application there where you can put in your details and somebody will get back in touch with you about what that looks like. And we're on socials everywhere. We have Symphonic, Symphonic Latin, Symphonic Africa, Symphonic Canada. So you can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn is a great place if you're looking to see what job postings we have. And so all those places, good place to start to get in touch.
Well, excellent. All right. So at the very minimum, go to symphonic.com, but then all over social media, you guys can find them. And really, the cool thing is all over the world. So it's not just here in America, but it's pretty much completely global. So Patra, again, thank you so much for joining us. We will wish Spencer Rattler and South Carolina football well for the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Just thanks so much for joining us, taking your time with us, and to all the listeners, thank you guys for joining us. If you love this, or you want to comment to Patra or us, just drop the comments in below, subscribe, like this video. But again, thanks so much for joining us.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Nxt In.